If betrayal had a smell, it wouldn't be perfume or cologne. It would be dust, the faint grit that settles on a windowsill overnight, the kind you only notice when a finger drags through it and leaves a pale, dishonest line. That's how it started, with a line where there shouldn't have been one, with a shift smaller than a breath. My name is Nick, 37. I make a living by cleaning up noise, taking a smear of sound and carving it until a voice rises out, exact and undeniable. I'm a freelance sound engineer, podcasts, indie films, the occasional corporate e-course that wants to sound friendly without sounding stupid. I live in a small house on the edge of our city with my wife, Laura. We paid for it in tranches of discipline. No vacations, heavy sandwiches, overtime that ran until the coffee grinder was as loud as my heartbeat. It was ours the way a scar is yours. The first time I felt something fracture, I was standing at the sink, rinsing blueberries. The kitchen window was cracked open just enough to let the air move the curtain like a slow wave. Laura's phone vibrated on the dining table. Not ringing, she hates ringtones. Just that low, private buzz you feel more than hear. It pulsed through the table, through the wood, into the plate beneath the berries. I felt it in my fingers. On the screen, a name flashed. Arca. We don't know any Arca. We know an Arcadi from Laura's office, but she never shortens names. She calls people by their full weight. When I picked the phone up to read the preview, I didn't even get the lock screen. The buzz died. Footsteps. Laura returned with a glass of water, the bead of condensation already slipping down to her elbow. Not asleep yet? She asked. Normal words, casual tone. But there was a stress on yet that I'd never heard before. A slightly higher pitch at the end, as if she were stepping over a wire only she could see. It's absurd, but these are the things I hear for a living. She took the phone, turned it face down, something she never did, and asked if I wanted tea. Do you want tea is so polite it's almost a shield. I told myself not to be dramatic. People put their phones face down. People get messages. It's a hard habit to live with hearing too much. When you spend your days scrubbing the ums and clicks from strangers' lungs, when you isolate frequencies like you're pressing your ear against the ribs of a song, you become attuned to the little betrayals of bodies, how a throat clears before a lie, how an inhale stalls when a name enters a room. It's both a profession and a curse. All the world's a waveform. 2 nights later, Laura said she had late edits at work. I believed her because she is competent, conscientious, and because belief is a home we lock from the inside. She left in a navy coat and the red scarf I like because it makes her mouth look like a promise. An hour after she left, our home alarm pinged. Window opened. Hallway. It's a glitch, I told myself. The system acts up after the first real cold. Still, I checked each frame. Everything seemed closed. I stood in the hall and inhaled the way you do over soup. There was a smell I couldn't place. Something metallic, like rain in a radiator. I wasn't always like this. Early in our marriage, I could sleep through thunder, hum along to anything. Back then, Laura would sit on the rug while I cut stems off a bouquet she found at a deli. I'd tell her about frequencies like they were another language. Human speech peaks around 1 to 4 kilohertz, I'd say, pinching air with the scissors. It's not a single place, it's a hill range. Children's laughter is higher, a kettle cry. Adult men sit a bit lower, a trumpet in a next-door room. Most of what we hear is harmonics. She'd smile without her teeth, which always made me feel like the world was polite to us. And which one am I? She asked once. You're the moment the song takes a breath, I said, the part where people lean closer. I don't know when that changed, when everything started taking breaths at the wrong time. The second message from our Arcanation came a week later. I was home that day trimming a brutal track for a true crime show that paid well because it had a sponsor every 6 minutes. The host had a voice like a haunted attic full of small animals you couldn't see but knew were there. Laura was in the shower, singing off-key, which I've always loved. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Arca, we're still on for tonight? Door code? The preview was bold and clean, and I had a stupid thought. Why do secrets always choose sans serif? I did not open the phone. I did not take screenshots. I did not do anything at all, which is its own kind of choice. I simply stared until the text collapsed back into a lock screen with a photo of us taken at the shore a lifetime ago. Her head tucked under my chin, my hand white on her shoulder, like something had already begun to disappear. "Everything okay?" she asked later, toweling her hair, steam making the mirror sweat out the shape of us. "Yeah," I said. "Just a tough audio day." That night, Lara had a book club, the same four women who always leave crumbs like confetti across our table and say they'll clean, then don't. I told her I might meet Sam for a drink. I did not meet Sam. I went to the studio I rent downtown, a narrow room with egg carton foam on the walls and a single window that looks into the alley of a bakery. The smell of yeast is a kind of kindness. I sat at my desk, stared at a blank Pro Tools session, and tried not to think. The clock slid past 9, then 10. At 10:14, my phone lit up. "Lara. Don't wait up. We're talking. It's therapeutic." I pictured wine, laughter that had corners, the woman who always brings olives with pits, and then apologizes for their existence. I pictured Lara's face at the center of the noise. I tried to picture Arca. But all my mind gave me was a blur with neutral shoes. I didn't sleep. At 1:47 a.m., I heard our front door open. We lived 10 minutes from the studio. My legs could have made the distance in 7. I watched the studio clock blink a dull green minute, another. Then I went home. The house smelled faintly like her perfume and something warmer, like cinnamon. The cinnamon made me angrier than anything else for reasons I still can't explain. It felt like a detail placed for me. In the morning, Lara made coffee and didn't touch it. She was in her robe, hair braided damp against her neck. "We should go to my mother's this weekend," she said. "She's been asking." I said sure. Weekend plans are the carrots couples hold out in front of themselves. You hop toward them, clip-clop. I don't know exactly when I decided to record her. Maybe it wasn't a decision. It was raining, a fine slant rain that sounds like rice being thrown at a quiet wedding. And I was working on a film scene where the detective realizes the voice on the phone belongs to someone sitting right beside him. The director wanted it to feel gradual, like the room was turning its head. That's when I pulled out an old digital recorder from a drawer, the kind with mics like silver eyes. I set it on the hallway console, the one with the bowl for keys. I told myself it was for testing a new noise profile. That evening, Lara said she was tired and fell asleep reading. I kissed her forehead, sat in the living room, and pretended to watch a documentary. I turned the volume low and listened to Lara's breathing through the wall like a tide at night. At 12:32 a.m., I woke up on the sofa to the sound of water, the shower, footsteps. The door creaked in that specific way wood learns the people who touch it. I stayed still. She padded down the hallway, paused just for a second outside the living room, then moved on. I counted to a stupid number, then got up, went to the recorder, and pressed and stop. Back in the studio the next morning, I slipped the audio into my session and stared at the waveform. At first, it was just a soft blue rug. I made myself breathe, then highlighted 90 minutes and ran it through a gentle expand, pulling the room's faint whisper into something I could really hear. There was the hum of our fridge, the radiator's small grievance, the distant siren. Then, our bedroom door, the hiss of the shower, and barely, like a fish turning in dark water. Lara's voice, not speaking, laughing. You know your person's laugh. It isn't just sound. It's an image, a muscle memory. Lara has 3 laughs, a soft one for strangers, a middle one for friends, and the sudden bright one that feels like opening the curtains on the first day of spring. The laugh on the recording was none of those. It was quieter but not careful. It was fed, satiated maybe. I know how awful that word is. I scrubbed back, listened again. Then I heard another sound. A phone vibrating, a whisper, 2 syllables shaped like Arca. I can't swear to it. It could have been Arca. It could have been archaic. It could have been nothing. I have made men sound guilty for a living by making their breaths sound like words. But this wasn't a courtroom. This was my home and a midnight laugh. I didn't confront her. Instead, I waited for the next time. That's how you lose yourself. You start living between next times. I moved the recorder to the kitchen the following evening, on top of the cabinets, pointed toward the hall. I did it while Laura was in the shower, telling myself I hated myself, and still doing it anyway. Then I went for a run I didn't want. I came home an hour later with sweat clinging to my back like a hand, and found Laura at the table eating yogurt too fast, eyes on her phone, spoon clinking the sides with nervous metal. I kissed her temple. She smelled like soap. There is nothing criminal about soap. That night, the recorder caught the front door at 11:58 p.m. Hotse the hallway sensor pinging softly, and then, this is the part that made me cold. The faint click of the basement door. We almost never use the basement. It's unfinished, with concrete that throws your footsteps back at you. I scrubbed the audio, lifted the floor noise until it sounded like air through teeth. There, steps. Another voice laced into the hum like thread in Tool. Too low to parse, the edges rounded by the recorder's automatic gain. I went down there in the morning with a flashlight and a feeling like I was trespassing in my own life. Dust, boxes, the old amp. A spider had made a beautiful doomed bridge between a rake and a rubber tub. Nothing else. I stood listening for a long time, as if the house would confess. I told myself, if she's cheating, you'll know. If she isn't, you'll erase these files and hate yourself in a smaller private way. The third recording is the one I can't forgive myself for, not because of what it captured, but because of what it made me hope for. It was Friday. Laura said she had a team dinner. She wore a silk blouse I had never seen and a perfume that arrived in the room a few seconds before she did. I told her she looked beautiful, and she smiled that polite smile again, the one that sounded like a closed door when translated into my head. After she left, I sat at our dining table, hands flat like I was praying. The recorder was already in place. I waited until I couldn't wait more. Then I took a cab to the office address she'd texted me earlier, telling myself I would just walk past. It was raining harder that night, rain with body. The office lights were off. A cleaning cart in the lobby looked like a small moon. I stood under the awning and watched my breath turn into ghosts. A car eased up to the curb, a black sedan, the kind that looks like anonymity practiced. Laura stepped out, alone, and for a moment I felt relief so intense it hurt my teeth. She wasn't with anyone. She was just late. She stood under the awning like me, scrolling. I wanted to text her. Turn around, as if this were a test we could both pass. Then her phone lit. She smiled, not the polite smile this time, not the strange Fed laugh smile, but the bright spring one, and looked down the street. A second later, someone joined her from the shadows. A man, tall, nondescript. Nondescript is a kind of description. He held out an umbrella in that faintly theatrical way polite men do. They didn't kiss. They moved under the umbrella with the ease of people who have rehearsed being close without touching. The rain thickened around them like curtains closing. I didn't follow. I don't know if that was cowardice or dignity. I went home. When I unlocked the door, the recorder's red LED was a small, patient eye. The audio from that night isn't even explicit. Two voices low. Laura's laugh once, not satiated this time, but soft, as if the room were the joke. The man said something like, "We're careful," and Laura said something like, "We are until we're not." And then there was the sound of a glass on wood. After that, silence threaded so tight I could have used it to sew up a wound. I closed the session. I dragged the file into the trash. I emptied the trash. I still hear it. If the story ended there, it would be simple. People cheat. People survive. But simplicity is a kind of lie. What happened next is the part I will always debate telling. 2 days later, I was hired to clean audio for a small local theater's new production, an original play about deception told through overlapping monologues. They wanted ambient sound designed like weather, a memory of rain. The artistic director, a brisk woman with bright hair, sent me reference files, table reads, rehearsals, a designer's note where she described the play's heart as the sound of someone agreeing to their own erasure. The lead actress's voice caught my ear. Not because it was beautiful, it was, But because there was a tilt in it, a way it bit the ends off words like someone afraid of being overheard. On the fourth file, when she laughed at a joke off mic, the hairs on my arm lifted. It wasn't Lara's laugh, but it triggered the same muscle memory, like smelling a train station and remembering a foreign city. Something braided my private life into this art, and I felt both seen and cornered. I went to a rehearsal the next night to capture the room's reverb for my mix. The theater was one of those box spaces reclaimed from a warehouse, with black walls and seats like patient teeth. The actors were small islands under the lights. During break, the lead actress, her name was Mara, walked past me, smiling. Not at me, at her phone. The smile was familiar the way a nightmare is. You recognize the feeling before the face. On her screen, a message flashed from Arca. The breath harness slipped in my chest. It could be a common contact, a stage manager, an inside joke. It could be none of my business. The word, Arca, I couldn't escape it. It hummed in my teeth now. I didn't speak to her. I didn't snoop. I recorded the reverb of claps and heels and the soft moan the building made when the HVAC kicked in. I went home and sat in the driveway, with the engine off until the windows fogged like a cheap dream sequence. When I walked in, the house felt composed. Lara was at the table in her robe, tea going cold next to her elbow. She looked up and smiled the mouth-only smile. "How was the rehearsal?" she asked. "Fine," I said. Then, "Who is Arca?" The sentence fell between us, heavy and strangely round, as if I had rolled a cannonball across the floor. Lara's face did something I had never seen it do. It emptied all at once, like the power had been cut. Then the lights came back up and she was already shaking her head, a small laugh that meant, "You're being silly." "What?" she said. "Arca? The team chat?" They named the group Arcade because of the office's ugly carpet. It autocorrects sometimes. "Who told you that?" I didn't say, "Your phone told me. The recorder told me. The rain told me." I said, "I saw a message once." She rose, put a hand on my chest. "You've been so tense," she said. "You work too much. Come shower with me." It was the oldest trick in the oldest book, and I still followed her down the hallway, like a guest in my own house. Under the water, everything is louder and quieter at the same time. The world becomes a drum. Lara leaned her head against my shoulder and let the water write brief lines down her back. I closed my eyes and tried to find that early version of us who could be wet and laughing without it feeling like a tactic. After in bed, she said, "You trust me, right?" Not like a plea, like a request she expected me to sign. "Yes," I said, and the word felt like a contract in a language I was weak in. Trust is a sound too, not like a bell, not like a door. Trust sounds like the space after a sentence ends, when you're deciding if it needs a period or a question mark. The next afternoon, I set 2 recorders, one in the hallway where I always had, and one smaller, inside the planter by the basement door. I told myself this was the last time. Then I went to the studio with a stomach like a stone. On my way there, at a red light, I saw Lara on the opposite sidewalk. She was alone, coat open to the cold, face lifted like she was listening for something. I almost rolled down the window. I almost said her name. The light changed, and I was part of the city again. At 8, her text came. "Team dinner. Love you." 10 minutes later, another. "Don't wait up." The period at the end felt like a lid. I despise how good I've become at reading punctuation like tea leaves. The house was empty when I returned near midnight. I sat in the dark like a burglar in my own life. The recorder's LED was an ember. At 1:11 a.m., the front door opened. A pause, then a whisper. 2 whispers, overlapping. Laughter, that soft room joke one. The basement door clicked. Feet began to descend. I didn't wait for morning. I didn't wait, period. I stood cold down my legs and opened the basement door as quietly as a person can who has decided the rest of their life is behind a single plank. I went down the steps with my hands skimming the wall. The basement smelled like damp concrete and old metal. A lamp was on at the far end, a small circle of warmth pretending to be a sun. Within it, Lara and the man, and a table. On the table, set with care, were 2 glasses, a bottle of wine, and a laptop open to a running waveform. The room's walls were lined poorly with hanging blankets to kill echo. In the corner, my old ribbon mic. An absurd thought arrived like a drunk at a funeral. "They're using my mic." Laura didn't flinch when she saw me. She rested her hand on the laptop like it was a pet. The man turned slowly, everything about him calm to the point of disrespect. "Nick," Laura said, and her voice was the one she uses when we find a spider, gentle, firm, reassuring, something flighty will be handled. "You're up." "Apparently," I said, and my voice sounded like gravel in a metal bowl. The man took a half step forward, not aggressive, measuring. He was tall in the way that makes rooms seem shorter. He had one of those faces you might remember forever or not at all. He extended a hand like we were meeting in a polite world. "I'm Mark," he said. I stared at his hand. "Is that short for Arca?" I heard myself ask, and then laughed, horribly one bright bark. "Sorry, hi Mark." Laura closed the laptop with 2 fingers. The room lost its fake heartbeat. "It isn't what you think," she said, "and if there is a phrase that should be banned by The Hague, that's it." "Really?" I said. I pointed at the table. "This looks like a dinner of secrets." "Assyriana." "This is a project," she said, and her face shifted into her professional one, the mild confidence she takes to meetings. "I was going to tell you when," the word snapped. "Before or after therapy with the one." "Please," she said, and the please or did something strange to me. It was old, a please or not from our early life, from the time when we were broke and tender, and everything we bought was either cheap or stolen by luck. It made a quiet in me. Mark lowered his hand. "We're recording a series," he said. His voice was smooth and irritatingly well-tempered. "Anonymous monologues, confessions. We were doing it upstairs, but the room noise." "Anonymous," I repeated like it tasted bad. "Yes," Laura said, relief flashing that I had grasped something. "It's for a non-profit who wants honest stories, addiction, jealousy, grief. They thought people would be braver if they could do it in private spaces. My boss asked me to coordinate. Mark is the facilitator." "Facilitator," I said, "like a priest for podcasts." He smiled a little like I had made a joke that landed in a bland room. "We rotate through homes. People feel safer." "Do they also feel safer texting Arca when The word came out like a whistle with a chip in it. They blinked in tandem. Laura turned to Mark as if to confirm a reality, and then back to me. "Arcadia," she said. "It's the organization. The texts are from the scheduling app. Are you okay?" A person can drown in air. I looked at the laptop. The open session had been labeled H-Draft 2. The waveform was fat and healthy. Beneath it, strips of takes stacked like vertebrae. I recognized my own templates in the levels. They had used my settings. The petty insult of that, this was my house, my tools. My name on the electric bill burned louder than any saintly explanation. "Why the basement?" I asked softer. "Why at night? Why the lying? The book clubs, the team dinners, the showers." Laura's mouth opened and closed around a fish of an answer. "We signed NDAs," she said finally. "We can't discuss contributors. We thought if we told you, you'd hear everything. You hear too much." There it was, the sentence that tilted the floor. You hear too much. Mark took a breath like he was about to say something that would make me hate him. "This was my mistake," he said instead. "I asked for discretion. I should have pushed for transparency with your partner. Laura's right that anonymity is fragile. People say braver things when no one in the next room knows. People say braver things. I imagined someone downstairs confessing to a small ruin while I lay upstairs and listened to the water run. I imagined Lara carrying those ruins upstairs in her skin. Was this what I had been hearing? The tender, satisfied laugh of speaking a truth? My mind began to misfire. "I thought you were—" I started, then trailed. She folded her arms, not defensive, but to warm herself. "I know what you thought," she said gently. "I saw your eyes. Why didn't you just say, project?" I asked. "Why the group name and the late nights and the—" Because I wanted something that wasn't you, she blurted, then winced at her own words. Not like that. I wanted space. Do you know how loud you are when you're silent? How your quiet fills rooms? When you're listening, it feels like scrutiny. I knew you'd pull it apart. I wanted to carry something without you hearing it. I'm sorry. The truth is a sound, too. It isn't clean. It fuzzes at the edges. It carries other people's fingerprints. I sank into the spare chair. The lamp made a small lake around our ankles. Somewhere above us, the house made the slow click it makes before the heater exhales. Is there someone else? I asked finally, because that sentence had become bone and needed to leave my body. No, Laura said, and there was no wobble in it. Just this. Just a bad way to hold something that mattered to me. Mark cut in, cautious. I can leave. You two. No, I said. Stay. If you leave, it will feel like a confession. I rubbed my face hard enough to see stars. Play me 20 seconds. Laura hesitated. Mark looked at her. She nodded. He opened the laptop and brought the waveform back to life. The room filled with a woman's voice. It was ordinary, which is to say it was someone's entire life. She was telling a story about stealing a book from a library as a child and never returning it because she couldn't return what the book had done to her. It wasn't tawdry or dramatic. It was intimate in the way small crimes are. After 20 seconds, Mark stopped it. Okay, I said. My throat felt like it was learning to be a throat. Laura leaned on the table. I should have told you, she said again, smaller now. I liked having a place where my job and a secret didn't feel like the same thing. We stood in the soft collapse of that. I thought about the recordings, about the laughter I had labeled with appetites that had nothing to do with me. Shame has a pitch. It sits in the lower chest. I recorded you, I said. Their heads jerked, tiny fish on a line. Hallway, kitchen, the basement door. I'm sorry, I won't. Laura's face hurt me then. Not because she looked angry, because she looked like she recognized me completely in that moment. You hear too much, she repeated, but it came out tender. And I speak too little. Mark packed the laptop on a reflex, like he'd been trained to rap and walk if a domestic quiet shifted. We can reschedule, he said. He glanced at Laura with something like professional care. You good? She nodded. He left without the theatrical politeness this time. Just a man moving through a room where he didn't belong. The door at the top of the stairs closed with a lid sound. In the basement's small, surviving warmth, Laura and I existed in parallel. Finally, she said, Do you want to hear what's been living in me, without the people who aren't us? Yes, I said, but not like a client, like a husband with broken tools. She laughed once, the middle laugh, and sat on the cement floor, back to the wall. I slid down across from her. The lamp threw our shadows together like a third person. I am not cheating, she started. I needed to say that at the bottom so it didn't feel like an alibi at the top. She tucked her hair behind an ear. I started this Arcadia thing because I was tired of coordinating budgets that pretend to be ideas. I wanted to hold something fragile with my hands, Nick. And I knew if I told you, you'd help. You'd optimize it. You'd make it beautiful. And then it would be ours, and I wanted something that was mine so I could bring it back to you as a gift, not a dependency. There is a point where an explanation stops being an argument and becomes a person. We had reached that point. I told her about the night under the awning, the umbrella, the politeness that felt like choreography. She closed her eyes and winced. That was Mark, she said. He is, aggressively, not my type in any universe. He was walking me to the train so none of the story contributors saw me get into an Uber outside the office. Optics. She made a face at the word. I thought of you. I thought, if Nick is recording this, he will invent a film to put it in. I did, I said, and I was very good at it. We stayed there a long time. Upstairs, the house exhaled. We didn't touch. We didn't perform the married couple that TV insists on: no sudden angry sex, no dramatic luggage. We did the smaller thing, told the truth poorly until it sounded like us. When I finally went to bed, I didn't sleep. Morning arrived at people's speed. Sunlight found the dust and wrote its honest lines. I made coffee and left it on the counter untouched. I opened my laptop and created a new session called Silence Under the Skin. I dragged in the little files from the hallway, the kitchen, the basement door. I listened to the hum of our life, the fridge, the radiator, Laura's breath moving through a house we both still lived in. I didn't turn it into evidence. I turned it into a map away from the version of me who needed it to be. I deleted the files. For a few weeks, we hovered. Trust doesn't change its shape because you ask it to. We were kind. We were careful. Kindness is not the same as closeness, but it's a bridge, and bridges hold if you walk gently. Then one evening, Laura set 2 bowls of pasta on the table and said, "They want me to record one of the monologues. As a test. Will you run levels? Not fix it. Just sit in the room with your hands in your pockets." It was a dare and an invitation. I said yes. We set up in the basement, not our basement, but the space we made afterward. Proper panels, a rug that didn't make your feet feel like you should apologize. My mic with her name taped to the stand so it knew why it was there. She sat, adjusted her braid, breathed. When she began to speak, it wasn't about me. Of course it wasn't. It was about the time her father forgot to pick her up at a movie, and how she learned to make herself small so no one would notice she needed. It was about carrying that smallness like a rosary. It was about the way she reaches for secrets, the way other people reach for hats. She said she loved me, not in the monologue, after, between us and the mic. We both cried a little. Then we ate the pasta cold. Something loosened, and you don't realize how tight you've been until the looseness is an ache. It would be clean if the story ended there. It doesn't. Nothing ends. Things quiet down. Months later, Arcadia asked me to come on as a consultant. Laura's idea, not theirs. "He hears too much," she told them, and she smiled when she said it. I agreed with one condition: no midnight basement, fully above board, nonprofit or not, secrets rot wood. We put that in the contract in a nicer font. We got better, not saintly, not storybook. I still look twice when her phone lights up, and sometimes she closes the door and my ribs go cold until she opens it again. She tells me when she's hiding something, even if the something is a piece of cake in the back of the fridge. We are silly about it on purpose. We practice. There's one more scene, and it's the one I have been writing toward without admitting it. Arcadia produced a small live event to launch the podcast's 2nd season, Anonymous Voices in a Dark Theater. Actors reading the words, a small choir of strangers' truths. They asked me to mix it live. Laura stood backstage with a clipboard like a shield, hair in that no-nonsense twist I love. In the audience, I saw Mark. We nod now, men who shared a room where they both felt out of place. He sat with his hands folded like a polite prayer. The lights went down. The room breathed. The first piece was a letter a man wrote to a friend he loved wrong for 20 years. The second was a woman counting her mother's pills love as arithmetic. The third was shorter, a voice I didn't recognize because it had been altered for privacy. It was a confession about listening, about turning small house sounds into perceived sins, about dragging a spouse into a courtroom you sink under your own kitchen, about deleting the evidence and choosing, with shaking hands, to make the next recording a song. It took me 3 sentences to realize the voice was mine. They had taken my practice session, the scratch track I made one morning in the studio when I was testing mic height, talking to no one in particular because you need a mouth to optimize a mic, and anonymized it. They'd pitched it up slightly, trimmed it, scored it with the sound of our house. They asked me permission without asking, the way you do when you already know the answer because you live with the person's breath. It was undeniably me, and it wasn't. On stage, the actor's mouth held my words and emptied them into a room full of ears. The waveforms crawled across my screen like little animals. I rode the faders as if I could protect the sentences by making them beautiful. I looked backstage. Laura was watching me, not the stage. When the piece ended, the audience made a sound I don't have a technical term for. In my files, it would be labeled room soft. Sure. In my chest, it was a forgiveness I didn't know I'd asked for. The applause was a different animal. Polite, respectful, a coat handed back to you with care. After, during the warm buzz of milling, I found Laura by the exit sign's cherry glow. "You could have warned me," I said, smiling so she'd know I wasn't angry. I thought you might hear it coming, she said, and her smile showed teeth this time. We walked home because the night was kind. The city felt like a polite background track finally mixed right. At a corner under a streetlight that hummed at a perfectly ugly 60 hertz, Laura touched my hand like she was placing something fragile down. I stopped. She breathed in. I'm pregnant, she said simply. I have replayed that sound in my mind every day since. Not because it was loud, because it was perfect. No wobble, no cover, no theater. The exact pitch of a truth that rearranges your furniture and your muscles and the way your future looks at you. We stood there a minute, both stupid with joy and terror, two people who had tried so hard to be careful, they almost erased themselves. A car passed. Somewhere a dog coughed. The world continued with us in it. Later, I would think about the months ahead, the appointments and the forms, the softness and the fear, the new sounds we would learn in the middle of the night, how our house would acquire noises we'd learn by name, how I would teach our child that silence is not the same as absence, that quiet can be full as bread, how we would fail and fail and mend again until our life sounded like ours. But on that corner, we just laughed. Not her polite laugh, not the fed, strange one I had invented in a dark room, the bright spring one, the one that opens curtains. It braided into my own an ugly, joyful thing, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't analyze it, I just let it ring. Back home, we stood in the kitchen and let the clock tick. The dust on the windowsill sat in its honest line. I didn't wipe it away. I will tomorrow, I thought, and then smiled because there would be a tomorrow, and it would be ours. I made us tea. We both watched it steam. She reached over and turned my phone face up. I want you to hear everything, she said. I will, I said, but not like a detective, like a man who knows the shape of your laugh. Upstairs, the bed was just a bed. The house exhaled. Somewhere in the walls, the heater clicked. It sounded like a heart trying out a new rhythm and deciding generously to keep going. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.